Well, hello again. We're back into the one-year Bible lesson for this week, and we're into the New Testament portion of that one-year Bible study. The portion that we're studying today is in Acts 14. Acts 14. So I hope you've had a chance to read through that section, but if not, you can do that later. We're going through the one-year Bible, and we're in Acts 14. Now I'm just going to read a passage here from the Apostle Paul, and he's on his missionary journey, and he gives a little statement here that at first seems a little bit strange, and I want to talk about it and explain a little bit about what it means. We go to chapter 14, verse 15, where it says, "We are bringing you good news, telling you to turn from these worthless things to the living God who made heaven and earth and sea and everything in them." So Paul is preaching to some people here in the book of Acts, and he's saying, we're bringing you good news, and we're telling you to turn from these worthless things to the living God. A little tongue twister there. But he's telling them that he's bringing good news to turn from these vain things that don't count for anything. Now, if you think about the psychology of what he's saying, you would think, Paul, that's not really going to go over very well with people. If you come up to some people and tell them that the things that they are doing are vain and worthless. Boy, I've got some tongue twisting today, but if you're telling them that what they do is vain and worthless, then you're not going to become popular with them usually. People usually don't like to be told to stop doing their favorite things and turn to something different. And usually they don't consider someone coming up and criticizing their favorite things. They don't consider that good news. They don't like to hear criticism. Most of us don't like to hear criticism. In fact, I don't know of one person that really enjoys being criticized. But Paul is saying, we bring you good news from God. And that good part of that good news is turn away from the worthless things that you are engaged in and turn to the living God. Now, it is good news from the bigger perspective. It is good news to be led away from some foolish activity. It is good news to be led out of an addiction. If you have alcoholism in your life and you are able to stop drinking and be led away from that lifestyle, that's good news. But when you go up to someone who has an alcohol problem, who is an alcoholic, if you go up to them and say, hey, I've got good news, turn away from alcohol, that's not good news, usually from that person's perspective when they're caught up in the addiction. It's the same way in any area of life. If you have someone who likes chocolate too much and eats a lot of chocolate, eats a lot of candy bars, and it's just one candy bar after another, and you say, hey, I have good news, stop eating all that chocolate and turn to healthy food. Well, that is good news. That is good news, but from a certain perspective it's good news. From that narrow, specific perspective of the person that loves chocolate, that's not good news. Now, I'm not putting down anyone who loves chocolate. I love chocolate, but we all have to remember in proportion is the key. Not all at once. I don't know if you've ever done this while you were a little kid, but sometimes little kids can get a hold of a chocolate bar or chocolate candy and eat too much of it and get sick. So it's not always a good thing, but I do love chocolate too in the right proportions, and I'm sure you do too. But what Paul is saying is God has good news for us, but we have to listen to that good news. And we can't just react on the surface level of what he's telling us. Sometimes he's telling us things that don't seem to be good news at the moment. Sometimes he's asking us to give up things that we don't want to give up. Now, it's interesting that the things that these people were engaged in, and it doesn't say exactly all the details, but sin, for example, is always a worthless activity. And it's something we always need to turn away from. But as you know, and as I know, and as we all know, we don't engage in sin because we think it's a worthless activity. We think at the moment that we're engaging in a sin, whatever the sin might be, we think that's a good thing. We think that that's what we really want to do. We think that that's the best course of action for our life. That's the way sin deceives people. We're all deceived at times with sin. But God is telling us to turn away from all those things. Turn away from sin. Turn away from the disobedience to God's will that we all participate in at times. Turn away from worthless things, vain things, empty things, and turn to the living God. And we do have riches to turn to. We have God's grace to turn to. We have God's will to turn to, His good will for our life. We don't have to be bound by addictions and habits and false living. We don't have to be bound by sin and the snare and the entanglement that sin produces in our life. We can be set free by the power of Jesus Christ in our life. And that's the good news that Paul is bringing. But again, it isn't always something that we might receive happily or readily or joyfully, because again, these people were engaged in their own way of life, and they had settled into a way of life. They had settled into practices and attitudes and ways of thought that they thought were the best thing for them. But Paul comes along and says, I bring you good news. I can bring you to a place of freedom. And they probably thought, well, freedom from what? We're happy the way we are. Freedom from your sins. And then when he explained, they began to realize that they were bound in sin. And so just like us, we need to be set free from our false thinking, false beliefs, false activities, false agendas in life, false schedules. You know, in America, everybody's busy. But everybody is not busy about the right thing, and we need God to show us what is His agenda, what is His will for our life, so that we don't wander about like people who are lost. And that's what sin will do. It will lead us down a path that will ultimately lead us to the dead end and to lostness. So I hope that you've gotten something out of this lesson, and I hope that you're able to continue to read on a daily basis from the One Year Bible. It's a joy to be on this journey with you, and I hope that you can continue on with us as we go week after week, exploring certain passages and certain sections of both the Old and the New Testament. So don't go away, and we'll be back for the third and final segment of the One Year Bible in just a minute. God bless.